Thank you. As I said, we were started in 1978. We are a nonprofit organization. You can see our mission and vision here on the screen. We do utilize this to make decisions in the work that we do every single day. We do three main things. The first is that we offer support to artists who want to do more work in public. One of the ways that we do that is through this grant program that we are talking about tonight. And it's actually the longest running grant program for public artists in the country. So I'm super excited about that. But you can see on the screen here the artists who are our current grantees, and we'll share a little bit more about what some of them are up to. We also work on a lot of really fun, creative public art projects across the country. We help people find artists to do projects. We do a lot of planning for public art with municipalities. We do some work on monuments and memorials. There's a whole variety of projects that we do related to public art, and there's more information on our website if you're interested in any of those things. And then the third thing that we do is publish a digital publication called Forward, which is really about how artists are working across sectors to tackle the challenging issues of our time. How are they making impact in sectors outside of arts? So you can see on the screen here our issue about monuments and memorials. Our latest issue is about civic health and civic engagement. We've got an issue about public health and community health. There's an issue about transportation. So just a variety, and they're all free and they're all on our website. I just want to take a second to thank our funders. As I said, these have been going since the 80s, and McKnight and Jerome Foundations have graciously and generously funded these grant programs that whole time. So a big thank you to them for their support. Okay, let's talk about defining public art. I like to start with this because the grants are really focused on advancing your career as a public artist in some way. So we define public art as art that is publicly accessible. It's original artwork. It considers the site and the history and the culture in which it's located. It's publicly accessible, whether it's on public or private land. It's also publicly accessible, whether it is funded with public or private money. Sometimes that means that you can't necessarily approach the artwork like a billboard, right? That is considered public art. It could be temporary or permanent. It doesn't have to last 25 years. It could be a performance that happens one time. It could be an ephemeral installation that degrades over time. There's a lot of possibilities under this definition of public art, but the main thing is that it is freely accessible to the public in some way. To be eligible for these grants, you do have to be based within the geopolitical boundaries of the state of Minnesota and the 11 Native nations that share the same geography. If you are a student during the grant period, you would not be eligible for these grants. And these are only available to individual artists and teams, not to organizations. Again, freely accessible. The project grants, which I'll talk about in more detail, would require you to do a project that is freely accessible to the public, so you can't charge for any entrance fees or anything like that. And it has to be new work that you are initiating. So it can't be a commission where someone has approached you and said, I want you to do this project. It has to be something that you have thought up, and like, really, what's your dream public art scenario that you would like to get funded for? That's what we're looking for in these applications. And you can only apply to one grant each year, but hopefully through this info session, you'll have a better sense of which grant you should apply for. If not, I am here to help. So I'll give you my email address at the end of this too, so that you can get in touch. We do work to provide access to our grant applications for a diverse group of artists, and we really value that all of our applications, our grantees, our panelists reflect the racial and cultural, gender, artistic, physical ability and geographic diversity of Minnesota and the Native nations that share the same geography. We are really focused on providing access and having our grant program reflect who actually lives in our state. Our grants are open now. They will close at 11:59 p.m. on Wednesday, October 15th, so you still have a little over a month. I would recommend starting that application earlier than the day of or the day before. It is through Submittable. Sometimes there can be tech problems, but I'd say the earlier you can get started on your application, the better. We do have 4 grant opportunities. 2 of them are for mid-career artists, and 2 of them are for early career artists. And we're going to talk about each one in detail. But first, let's define what's early career and what's mid-career, because that can get a little gray sometimes. First, these are not defined by age. It does not matter how old you are, it's how long you have been practicing in your craft. So if you are an artist who has been working for 12 years on, your medium, even if you haven't done public art, you would be considered a mid-career artist because it's more than 10 years. So we're looking at the early career artist definition here. You've been working in your medium or in your artistic career for 2 to 10 years. Again, it doesn't matter how old you are. You really know where you want your work to go. You're still developing your voice in your artistic practice. You maybe don't have the amount of recognition that you would if you had been working, for 10 or 5 or 10 more years, but you're building that up. This is like a career choice. It's not a hobby, right? So it's vocational. You're making money from your artistic career. And again, if you're more than 10 years in your artistic practice, you would be considered a mid-career artist. So you've not only been working for more than 10 years, but you have a large body of work. You've gained recognition through shows, galleries, awards, talks, if you give talks at conferences or things like that. Again, age is not a determining factor. And a lot of times artists will work in one medium and then shift to another one and shift to another one. That's totally okay. But we're looking at the total number of years that you've been practicing art, not just in one medium. If any of that is confusing, please reach out to me. I'm more than happy to help figure out which category you would fall in so that you're applying for the correct grant. So let's start by talking about mid-career project grants. We give out 5 of these. Each one is $10,000. These go to mid-career artists to do a new project somewhere in public somewhere that's publicly accessible. Again, this is new, it's initiated by you. You do have to do a project in the grant period, which is January to November. One of our grantees this year was Louis Fitch. You can see photos of what he did. He worked on a project called Art for Community, and he transformed 6 utility boxes on East Lake Street into inspirational works of public art that reflect themes of resilience and vision and passion, growth, family, and culture. And he consulted with community members on what they should look like and what the content should be. Another one is from Clau Valentino and Coppola Murals, and I apologize for these images. I took them from a video, so the person's actually moving, but they developed something called Wild Plants, which is a mosaic mural installation at a place called Beautiful Laundrette in St. Paul. And so they worked with community members to help actually design and make these murals and then installed it on the outside of the building. We also give out 2 grants for professional development to mid-career artists. Each one of these grants is $5,000. And this is really about you advancing your public art career forward. You do not have to do a project for this grant. You could use this time to take a class and build skills. You could use this money for purchasing software that you need that will help you, build your career further in public art. It is not a project grant. You do not have to do a project if you get a professional development grant. It is, again, about you building your skills. One of our current grantees is Cecilia Cornejo. She is, she was working on figuring out how to deepen the community-informed part of her public art practice through a new weaving and embroidery technique. So she actually took a trip to Chile and worked with a group called Memorarte, which is a woman-led collective of embroiderers. And they work on pieces that promote and defend the rights of humans and nature. So she traveled, she learned new skills, she brought that back, and now she's building a project based on that. But that project is not a part of the grant funding here. It led to a new project for her. So those are a couple examples of what you could do with professional development funding as a mid-career artist. We also have 2 grants for early career artists. One is project grants. So we give out 2 of these, $8,000 each. Similar to the mid-career project grant, this is for a public art project that you are initiating that is freely and publicly accessible, and it has to happen between January and November of 2026. It can be temporary or permanent. It can be located anywhere in the state of Minnesota. One thing about both of our project grants is that you do have to secure a site before you apply. So we will ask in your application for site approval and documentation of that site approval with your application. Again, it can't be a commission. It has to be a project of your own initiation. So one of our current grantees is Rebecca Anderson, and she worked on this mosaic tile installation in her hometown of Chisholm, Minnesota, and really started to build these tile murals in holes in the sidewalk. She wanted to restore the place that she lives and get people interested in the sort of public infrastructure in the community. Again, it was of her own initiation, and she installed it in the grant period time. We then give out research and development grants to early career artists. The goal behind these is very similar to the mid-career professional development grant. These 4 grants of $2,500 each are for early career artists to build their skills and move their public art career forward. So this could be the development of a proposal for another public art project that you're applying to. It could be that you want to hold community dialogues to understand how your public art career might move forward and how you might be able to facilitate more community conversations in your career. You might want to spend time building a model of something that you want to make, or doing research on materials. Again, you do not have to do a project with this. This is really for you to pay yourself to build your skills in your public art career. So because there isn't a project, I don't have photos to show you of what our current grantees are working on, but I can share with you what they are doing. So for example, Nancy Azria is one of our current grantees, and she is looking at mud stencils and developing she's doing research and developing her own process around eco-graffiti mud stencil processing. She's figuring out how to incorporate color into that's environmentally friendly, and then thinking about how she can utilize that as a drop-in method for people to be engaged in her public art process. Amy is she's taking some classes to help her with her drawing and illustration skills so that she can represent more cultures in culturally appropriate ways in her illustrations. She's doing artist workshops with youth to understand how they like to be represented, and then she is building her skills so that she can teach others how to do that as well. Michael here is working on developing construction processes for a project that he wants to build in the future. So let's talk through the application. Our applications are on Submittable. And so when you go to our Submittable page, this is what you will see. We have one grant or one application for each of the grants. So you would select which one you want to apply for, whether it's mid-career project, early career project, mid-career professional development, or early career research and development. The questions in all of these are the same. So we're just going to look at one of them. There are a couple differences in the project grants versus the research and development, professional development grants, but I'll talk through those. So let's take a look at the early career project grant. At the top, it just shows, how much money and how many of these we give out, what the deadline is, when the grant period is, etc. We will ask you for your contact information if there's anyone working with you on this project. And then we just like to hear how you learned about this grant as well. New this year, you can submit a video application rather than doing this written application. If you'd prefer to do a video, what you would do is go to each one of these and just type in NA because they are required responses. And then just make sure that you address all of the questions that are in the application in your video submission. An easy way to do that, if you have Zoom, is to open up Zoom and just record yourself on your Zoom screen and then upload that in this spot right here. But the questions are, what is your project title, right? How are you titling your project? And then what's your project overview? The project overview is just a short description of what your project is, and we'll use that in combination with the project title for any of our public-facing communications. So we have a website on or a page on our website where we show all of the grantees and their projects. This is where that would be used, or in a press release that we send out, or in our newsletter announcing the grantees. The project proposal then is the longer portion of this. This is really where you tell us what it is that you would like to use the grant funding for. It's really, really helpful if you can say, this is the thing that I'm trying to do, and this is how I'm going to do it. Even just laying out a timeline from January to November of 2026, saying these are the activities I'm going to do in each one of those months is really helpful for the jury, because then they understand, how you're thinking about your project, how you're approaching it, and they know that you're thinking about it in a really well-rounded way. The next question is benefit to the community. Community can actually be defined in a lot of different ways. So we would ask you to define the community within your grant proposal. So one example is, I'm an embroidery artist, and I'm applying so that I can scale up my hand embroidery so that it can be bigger, and I could do it on a fence, let's say. I would define my community within that as other embroidery artists who I could then bring what I learn in my research to that group so they can also benefit from me getting this grant and doing this research. You could define community as geography, right? Like my block, my neighborhood. You could define it as like a professional affiliation. I am a landscape architect, and so I'm thinking about how this can help other landscape architects, right? That sort of thing. Within that question, you also then want to talk about how what you are proposing in your grant connects you to that community further, and how will that community benefit if you are the one who gets the funding for this. The next question is around diversity of lived experience and perspective. As I mentioned before in our access commitment and we really are looking for our grantees, our applicants, our jury to reflect who lives in our state, right? So we just want to hear from you. What's your lived experience and perspective, and how does that connect to the project that you are proposing here? In the early career project and early career research and development applications, we will ask for you to define early career status for us. In the mid-career grants, we'll ask you to define mid-career. So you can just take a look at what's underneath here and start to say, like, I've been practicing for 5 years. I've had 2 shows that were solo. I've been in a bunch of group shows. You know, what are some of the things that help us understand where you're at in your either early or mid-career status? And then the impact on artistic development and career. How would you getting this grant push your public art career forward? That's really what we're looking for in this question. This question is it's super important in all of the grants, but it's really important in the professional development and research and development grants because you don't have to do a project. So we want to understand how you doing this research might help your career move forward, right? It's really about how this is going to push you forward as a public artist. We ask for your resume. If you have a team that's working with you, we ask for just 1 page for each person on your team. It can be a resume, it can be a bio, it can be you know, an experience page if you've ever heard of those. Just we're looking for information about you and any of your collaborators. So this is where it gets a little different for the project grants versus professional development and research and development grants. In the project grants, this is where we will ask you to upload site permission. This is not a letter of support from a collaborator. It is something from the person or entity that is responsible for the place where you are going to do your project, saying, yes, this person has my approval to do this project here. I'm in charge of this site and they have my approval to do this. You can see some examples here. If you're doing a mural, we'd ask for permission from the wall owner. If you're going to do a sculpture, wherever that sculpture is located, we'd ask for permission from whoever owns that. There are sometimes you might do like a performance and it might be in a park. Let's say you're going to do it, you want to do it in Rice Park in downtown St. Paul, and the only thing that you would need to do for that is fill out an event application for St. Paul Parks, because that's all that they require you to do, and then upload that application to your grant application here, so that we know that you have taken that step to secure a space for your project. If you have any questions at all about this, please reach out. My email address is right here. I am more than happy to help you figure out how to get the right things for your grant application. The second thing that we ask for project grants that we do not ask for research and development or professional development grants is a project budget. So we want you to upload a budget that shows your sources of income, your expenses, and how that shakes out in the end. What is really important here is that the work that you propose in your grant application, you have to be able to do it for the dollar amount of the grant. So let's say that you have another source of funding and it's also $10,000 and you're asking for $10,000 for a mid-career project grant. Your project has a total of $20,000, but what we're looking for in both this budget and your proposal is what can you do for the $10,000 that would be from the forecast grant. So sometimes it means just like scaling your project down a little bit. or scaling it up a little bit depending upon what you have in mind. But you really, really, really want your project budget to match your grant proposal and what you're writing in this proposal section here. So if you name someone here that you're going to bring on as a collaborator, we should see a line item for that person in your budget. You should pay yourself if you have any rental fees, if you are purchasing equipment. All of the stuff that you will need should be in that project budget, and it should match up with your proposal. And do not forget to pay yourselves. There is a budget template here that you can download if you don't have one for yourself. And then for every grant, we just ask for some work samples. We, for the early career artists, I think it's 5 work samples that we ask for, and for mid-career, we ask for 10. And really the focus of these work samples should help give us a sense that you are in fact able to do the thing that you are proposing in your grant, right? So you are proposing to do a mural. We want to be able to see that you've got some painting and illustration skills, maybe that you've worked in scaling things to different sizes, but the work samples that you upload should support what you are proposing in your grant application. You can submit images, you can submit audio, you can submit video, but please do pay attention to these asks down here. We try and limit how much video a jury member needs to watch. So please only submit the sections that you want them to see, and try and maintain that limit. I know that can be tough too, so just reach out if you have questions about any of that. You can also upload text if you have documents that you have written. And then the last part is demographic information. This is all optional. These are not required questions, and the jury will not see any of this information. It will all be hidden from them. So you can share that if you are comfortable doing that. I went through all of that very quickly, but again, please know that I am here. So if you have questions after tonight, please just reach out. I'm more than happy to help. Let's though talk a little bit about the selection criteria. We really want to make this selection process as transparent as possible. The grantees are selected by using these criteria that you see on the screen, and you'll see that each one of these actually aligns directly to a question in the grant application. Just a note that we hire an outside jury. So the staff and board at Forecast are not the decision makers about who gets funding. We have a panel of 3 jurors this year. One is local, one is regional, and one is national. So they look at all of the applications and then score them all against these criteria that you see on the screen. We have conversations, and then they make decisions. The panel process is not open to the public, but you can request feedback on your grant application after you're notified of the jury's decisions. So let's talk a little bit about each one of these. Quality and clarity of your proposal. This is really the strength of your proposed idea. You have a clear consideration of the scope of work that you're proposing. You know that you are able to see it through to completion. The jury's really looking at, like, what do you want to use this grant money for? How will you use it? What activities will you be involved in? What kind of research or partnerships are you going to have to make? What are the things that you need to do to implement the idea with which you're applying for this grant? That's where quality and clarity of proposal comes in. The value of the project to the artist's development, and it's not necessarily a project, right? The value of the grant to your development as a public artist. This really is about how it is going to help you build skills and push your public art career forward, right? We're really focused on your public art career and how you getting this grant and participating in these grant activities will push your public art career to the next level or push it forward in some way. Benefit to the community. Again, we talked a little bit about this. How do you define community? There are lots of ways to do that. What part of you connects to the community where you're doing the project or your research? And how will you doing this work and getting this grant benefit that community that you have defined? That's really what the jury will be looking for. And then the fourth one is quality of your work samples. So it's both about the quality of the work that you are sharing, but also the degree to which the work samples support your ability to complete what you are proposing in your grant application. Do your work samples provide information about what the application proposal is offering? Do they show the jury that you can really carry out what you are proposing? One little tip in Submittable, when you're uploading your work samples, you will be able to enter in a name for the work sample, information about materials and size if that relates. But then there's a notes section. And what you can do in that notes section is write in how this work sample relates to what you're proposing. So one example would be, I'm going to use murals again. Let's say you're going to do a mural and you want to incorporate a community process into your mural making process itself, but you haven't done those two things together before. However, maybe you've done community engagement or community involvement in some other way. You could upload something that shows that, and you could write in that notes section, this is an example of how I've done community engagement before. I want to incorporate this into my mural process. And then maybe you have a work sample or two that show either murals or illustrations that you have done that show your ability to do that type of artistic work. I'm throwing a lot of info at you, but I just want to sort of wrap up this part before we get to questions with some tips for writing your grant. So the first is about cohesion. Oops, sorry. Cohesion. Really think about each question of the application as a piece of the larger puzzle, right? So when you put all of those things together, you're creating an entire story of what you would do during your grant period. Your budget, if you have to submit one, reflects your proposal, which reflects your the effect on your public art career and pushing that forward in your development. All of it fits together into one nice big picture. Being specific and flexible seem like two opposite things, but really what this means is that we want you to get specific about how and what you're doing, but leave some room for flexibility, right? So it's totally okay to say something like, I know I'm going to do X, Y, and Z, but from that activity, I'll learn more that's going to influence the next phase of this project. I know I need to do things in this order, but there's maybe a little something here that I will need, I'll need information from this phase of my work to help me with this. It's okay. I think a good way to think about this is pull together a structure for what you think you need to do over the grant period. And then if there are things that you absolutely know, slot those in. And then wherever you're unsure, you can just write a note that says, I'll need information before I can do this, or this will be dependent on something that happens in phase 2 or whatever it is. So get specific about what you know, but leave some room to be flexible. Also, things change fast. And so you may learn something in phase 1 of your project that changes up what you need to do in the rest of it. And that is okay too. Number 3 is urgency. And this just means, why is this project important for you to do now? And why are you the best person to do this project now? The jury will be looking for, understanding that you are the right person to do this and that it is something that's really needed, that you have a sense of urgency around it. And then the fourth one, seek help. If you write your grant application, have someone who is either not familiar with your work or is not an artist read it. I like to send things to my mom sometimes because she'll read it and say, I have no idea what you're doing, or she'll say, oh, I totally get it, right? But she's not in this art world all day, every day. So it's helpful to have someone sort of from an outside perspective to read through it. I think those are the biggest things as far as that goes. There are a few things that we cannot fund because we are a nonprofit organization. We can't fund anything that supports a political candidate. We can't fund anything that is religious in nature or anything that includes pornography or that will harm others or that are illegal activities. We talked through these. We do offer help. I am here to help you. I'm here to answer questions. I am happy to do a 30-minute feedback meeting with you if you'd like to do that. We do have more information and FAQs and tips on our website. And we also have some videos of past grantees on our Vimeo site, which is linked on our website. So you can just see what some of the other things are that grantees have done in the past. Here's my email. Please write that down or screenshot this. And please do reach out if you have questions about anything.